Hey guys, so today I'm going to be talking about one of my pieces here, the latest piece that I worked on, which was done when my Photoshop was being very faulty, so I didn't have any Liquify. And I usually use Liquify when I flip the canvas because it's just great for positioning everything. The equivalent to flipping the canvas in real life, which is one way to kind of detect whether or not you're in their tunnel vision, is to take the sketchbook paper and flip it backward towards the light. So face the drawing to the light and then look through the paper and you'll see the flipped image. For painting by hand on like a canvas, and you can't flip it because it's an opaque canvas, you usually have a large mirror and you look at the mirror and the mirror will display the flipped image and you can see your mistakes. So that's one thing that I felt like wasn't the cheat. That's never going to be a cheat, flipping the canvas. I don't know why I've heard some of my students tell me that it feels like a cheat. It's not, absolutely not. There are many equivalent ways to do it in traditional work that reveals your mistakes to you. But Liquify, that's a cheat. And Liquify is not so much a cheat in that, because the word cheat seems like you're cheating your way into representing a skill set you don't have. That's not true. You are flipping the canvas, you're using Liquify to correct mistakes you see. So you still need the skill to see the mistakes. And that's definitely something that there is no shortcut for. There's no shortcut for skill. What I would call a cheat is using texture that you said you hand painted, or using photo bashing that you said you did yourself, or any way in taking credit from a photograph or someone else's work is obviously a dishonest way of representing your skill, and that is, of course, with all guns cocked, cheating. But Liquify still requires, it's still a tool, it's a valid tool that can be used to get you through what needs to be done in order to achieve what you feel like looks right. So if it's if it's lasso, if it's dodge tool, if it's any digital tool offered by Photoshop, it's a valid tool if it is something that you can use alongside your skill and judgment and your visual instinct. So that, I didn't have that today, and I usually use it. I use it quite a bit towards the start, and unless I find something really wrong with the piece, I will, I will use it later on. One other cheat that is really, there is really no equivalent for it in traditional, and again, it's not really a cheat if it's still you using it guided by your judgment and your skill, is lasso, Control-C, Control-V, so copy pasting a section and then shifting it. That's something I do a lot. That's something I did with the eyebrows. I usually lower the eyebrows if I kept them too high. I don't want that innocent look in the expression or something like that. So I, just do that with the eyebrows, or do that with the nose if the nose is a little bit long, because I do have long face syndrome and I will have it forever, and I'm constantly correcting it. So as you can see in the footage here, Liquify was doing some weird distortion and it wasn't working, and it was really throwing off the entire piece, so I couldn't depend on the result from Liquify, and it was really off, so I couldn't use Liquify at all as I was working, and I maybe used it in the start and for those big molar changes, but when I really needed it, when I had these crazy offs after flipping, I could not use Liquify because the distortion was so immense. So not having Liquify for the duration of the painting, that was really challenging in that I had to hand paint some changes, and that was easy. The changes that I could hand paint or shift by hand, those were easy, or maybe use transform tool. But there were just some changes where I would paint with my head kind of tilted, and that resulted in a tilted drawing. So if you've ever drawn on a canvas and you put your head on the table as you're drawing on your sketchbook, you lift up the drawing and it's distorted. That's exactly what happens when you're not working and flipping the canvas consistently. You're entering this tunnel vision that creates an actual perspective distortion along an axis that leads to the drawing being lopsided, or like there is a black hole in the top right and it's pulling and drawing all of the proportions to it. And you can actually track down where you're having this distortion. It could be your monitor. It could be the tablet and the way you're holding your tablet. It could be your mind, your actual mind playing tricks on you, making you think that you're seeing something proportionate when you're not. So not having Liquify for the duration of the process really revealed to me where that black hole is in my thinking, where that that distortion, that axis or the central axis of the distortion is coming from. And for me, no matter how I'm drawing, it's always pulling towards the top right of my painting. For some reason, all of the eyebrows, all of the eyes, for some reason, they're always pulling towards the top right. Even though in my flip, the original flip, the eyebrows look perfectly level. I'll flip it, everything will start pointing to the top left because it was once pointing to the top right. So I'm just wondering why that happens. Even the eyelids look like a perfect dome to me and perfectly symmetrical in the original flip. I flip it and they're all pointing to the top left. And I'm just wondering why that's happening. And it could be, I don't know, it could be a concussion I had a long time ago. It could have been just my actual inability to measure perfectly. Eyeballing is always going to be subject to human error. It could be just bad measurement. It could be not flipping the canvas early on. So it doesn't have to be something wrong with my, vantage point or my brain or some habit that I can't reach or correct right away. So flipping the canvas is what revealed this to me. Not being able to fix it is what really revealed to me that it's not just because of not flipping the canvas that I'm noticing or that I have this issue. It's because of something deeper in my thinking, I think. Because I'm just finding that it's a trend. So for me, I believe that it's, in my brain, I don't know what it could be. Everything's always pulling to the top right. But for you, it could have been, bad measurement. The thing is that there's always, and this is the truth of the matter, your lack of skill could just be the problem. So sometimes if you don't draw well, you've got so many fundamentals you're sifting through. It's hard to tell if it's fundamental problems that are leading to your disproportionate drawings, or if it's some real fundamental thinking where it's a real traceable problem in your visual ability to measure, or your visual instinct for measurement, or your ability to balance symmetry, and everything's always pulling to one direction or another. I notice that I do tilt my head while I'm drawing. Be careful with that. It's just more comfortable for me. Also, I pulled my neck a long time ago, my neck muscle, so it's just more comfortable for me to not use that half of my neck and just let my head fall on my right. And that sort of, I guess, leads to the distortion, things pulling to the top right. But ever since I started going on video with my students, I noticed that I'm back and forth tilting my head. So sometimes I'll have it on my head on my left shoulder, sometimes I'll have my head on my right shoulder, just trying to catch and figure out the measurements. And I'll still have this pulling towards the top right thing. So that's why I think it's a fundamental brain thing. I did have like 7 concussions when I was a kid. I was playing like crazy in the playground, so it's hard to know exactly what's causing it. Even now, as I'm looking at the process, one eyebrow is pulling towards the top right. The jawline is not measured. The lips are asymmetrical, and this is only because it's been a while since I've seen this process. And it's really difficult for me to see this in the time. And I didn't notice that I had it so badly until I couldn't access Liquify and correct as I go with each interval flip, or each flip interval. So it's really crazy being able to find your own problems like that, to kind of self-diagnose where you have some real blind spots. And I have to look out for it now that now that I'm aware of what it's like not having Liquify. I have to be aware of this when I'm doing traditional work, especially if I'm going to be investing permanent media into it, such as watercolor or oils or acrylics, or if I'm ever working on a project where I'm drawing something on a wall. I will have to have a mirror with me the entire time, making sure that I'm looking at this flip and making sure that all proportions are exact. Habitually going over, 3/4 view with sketching and years and years of mileage will ensure that you, based off good habit building, will know where to put the eyebrows, that it's instinctively in the right spot. But being aware of my problem now and that distortion thing that I have, especially the long face syndrome problem, I have to, be more aggressive with my approach to the flip and my fundamentals and my symmetry. The face is never perfectly symmetrical, but my problem was mostly due to that distortion pulling to the top right. It's like there's a, like a black hole. It's slowly seeping away at all the major axes or anchors of every major feature. Like all of the eyebrow arcs weren't positioned properly, even though they looked perfectly symmetrical. It's that kind of disproportionate stuff that is outside of the natural asymmetry or organic asymmetry in a face, and more towards skeletal asymmetry, the eyebrow bones not being equally flipped on either side. So that's a problem. So I wanted to talk about that with you guys. Be more attentive to your dependency on Liquify. It's not a bad tool. It's an amazing tool. But it's definitely not having it for the duration of the painting when I really needed it. And that problem that it had with that weird distortion led to me just avoiding it for the like 90% of the painting process. Really revealed that I have a distortion problem, and it's like I'm not really. It's like a scope distortion. All that aside, if I were to talk about my major challenges apart from that with this painting, would be just the expression. I wanted to build an expression that spoke to me, nothing too neutral and nothing too highly expressed. You can see from my portfolio I tend to go for subtlety in expression, more feminine expression, and just that poise and that grace in the expression that I really appreciate in sketches. Somewhere in there, I don't like how cut and paste everything felt with my hard brush. I was kind of out of practice for a while because I had just come out of the vacation and I was healing from an injury, so I really wasn't painting a lot because I was avoiding sitting on my office chair, and it kind of felt like I was not really organically used to my dashboard anymore. So I started using my smudge brush, and I'm using my number 5 smudge brush or my number 4, I forget, but it just on really low opacity, just throwing over that haze. So I was having a lot of trouble making it feel like it was hand painted. It felt really digital. And you guys will see in the PSD when you look at it, it did feel very, very artificial. Another thing that I wanted to do was starting with this drawing, I wanted to give her lighter eyes. I wanted to give her like blue eyes or green eyes or something in that value range. And it just didn't work. I just didn't like the amount of detail that was happening in there. So as you know, for me, the 3 ways to detail, the ones I prefer, there's 3. There's shrinking your brush, which is the one you should avoid. There's edges, which is the one you should always work on. And there's contrast, which you should be careful with. These are the 3 ways to draw an eye towards one specific area. So when I'm shrinking the eye and shrinking the pupil, and adding in specular lights and adding in the little creases and folds in the eye, in the iris, and not the eyelid, the actual iris anatomy, those little bumps and lines, and the outline of it is just way too much small brush work. I find myself working with a small brush for way too long, and I'm not comfortable with that. And the way that I get what I get when I draw is, because I zoom out. My style, or what you see when you look at my portfolio, is all due to the zooming out, just having that distance control, seeing my larger core shadows, my eye socket shadows, knowing what value to use for the whites of the eyes, the lower eyelid darkness, the cast shadow of the nose. All that is stuff that I like to think I'm accurate with, because I'm zooming out. And so when I find myself zooming in, it feels so unnatural, at least to me. So it's not so much that I adore brown eyes more than any other. All eyes have their own beautiful, way, and obviously green and blue eyes are just beautiful. But something about that thick brown eye, that harsh, bold value, works alongside that one way to create detail, which is through contrast. So I love the contrast, that center anchorage that comes with a dark pupil, a brown eye that just draws me in and makes me want to keep painting. So I thought, I know I started off with a blue eye, and I'll paint one if I ever had to. But the question is, do I want to? And if I don't want to, then I'm not going to want to finish the drawing. And this was all me just getting myself back into the practice. So I said I'm just going to keep it brown. That was a really big, I know it's a small little detail, but it was just, it reminded me of what I value and what I prioritize in a drawing. One thing that I also noticed, because of going back to that flip problem in the Liquify, is that she looks spaced out. I usually like having a really strong focus to the eye, so I cross the pupils in towards each other, the iris, sorry. And here I would have flipped the canvas, and the left eye, the current left, would be what is flipped, and to the right, and I would have noticed that it's kind of spaced out. She kind of looks like she's looking way off into the distance. I wanted her to look like she's more focused. So that's something that not having access to Liquify kind of made me lose. Another problem would be the expression. I wanted one eyebrow a little bit higher than the other. And that just felt like too much asymmetry, and I just didn't really invest in that. I wanted that kind of one eyebrow is curious, the other's kind of not there yet. Asymmetry in the eyebrows is amazing for creating half expressions. It's literally just cut and paste. Half of one eyebrow should be one expression. One eyebrow should be one expression, the other eyebrow should be another, and that's how you get layered expressions. So surprised and scared. One eyebrow can be all the way up symmetrically, and then the other eyebrow could be up as well, but the inside of the eyebrow could be, the inside of one eyebrow could be higher than the inside of another. So here I wanted a little bit of that, but because I was having that Liquify thing, I didn't really get it. I do end up lowering one eyebrow, but I didn't really move it accurately. The strongest muscles in your eyebrow are the ones that link to your eyebrow arc. They're right there, so that's usually the eyebrow arc moving forward. And that's something that I would have had to either repaint the eyebrow completely, which I did not want to do, or use Liquify, which I had no access to. So that's something that I felt like I didn't have, and every time I flipped that, I went into Liquify, that distortion just kept happening, that bug, and I didn't understand it. It was only when I restarted the computer did it start working properly. And I was in the middle of my my stream, and I didn't want to do that and have my viewers wait for a reboot. One thing that I wanted to do for her is give her more of an African Nubian kind of mixed race face. So that wider nose with a flatter leveled septum. So that septum usually is a lot lower on like Caucasian faces, let's say. So when you want to do an African face or even an Asian face, you want to flatten the nose bridge, so you can lower the amount of highlight you have on the nose bridge, throw a little bump above the ball of the nose, the button nose, make it a button nose, and level the septum with the nostrils, or at least closer. So that mixed kind of brace thing was having the septum slightly lower, but still a lot closer to the nostrils. Obviously widening the nostrils at or wider than the inner corners of the eyes, that vertical line that comes down. And of course the thickness of the lips, so the kind of lips she had really also added to that. I liked her face, I liked what was happening with her expression. It kind of entered a more serene content than kind of like that graceful depression, I guess it can be called, which is a lot of my drawings have that graceful depression, which says a lot about myself. But I do like that. There's a little bit of a three-dimensional quality to the characters. They're beautiful, but they're not necessarily perfect for the stage just yet. They kind of don't like being on stage. I like drawing girls that look like that. Considering that I didn't have Liquify, I think the flip is still pretty healthy, all things considered. I did want to transform her into a full illustration because I had a plan for it. But I don't like illustrations that just keep catering to the front view, so I didn't really like that. I like building illustrations from the gesture out, and I would obviously open up Portrait Studio for that and experiment with gestures, which is what I always tell you guys to do, especially for this month's challenge. So that's a very, very big deal for me. I've never promoted students to turn their 14-day challenges into obviously illustrations, no masterpieces, stop the masterpieces kind of deal. Just let a study be a study, and take what you can from it and go on to the next phase. Adding another week's worth of art is another 7 days you're delaying for the next study to start, and that's just lower mileage at the end of the day. And there's really no other word that I can use rather than just like dicking around. You're just poking at the you're just poking at the monitor, really, and hoping that it can become some kind of transformative masterpiece that represents your portfolio. No. Every time I've tried to do that, it has failed. Not because the drawing didn't look good, but it failed in my own opinion of it. It's a front view, it's boring. It was just a 14-day challenge format. And a lot of my students ask me why I don't do 14-day challenges or what. It was because I'm always doing them, honestly. And when I do them, they are obviously, the full-on, full-pushed render from front view. So I don't need a 14-day challenge anymore, to be quite honest with you. My day ones always end up being what people aim for as day 14. That's not to gloat or not to boast or anything, but it is what it's my specialty. It's what I've always done 14-day challenges, not just for 14 days, but almost like one drawing or every 2 days of a front view that I did for like years and years before I started teaching. So I've always worked on the portrait. The portrait has always been my main focus, and apart from that, I get a lot of practice while teaching and editing other people's 14-day challenges. So that's something I have a lot of experience with, so I don't feel like I need 14 days to dedicate, because I've already pushed the render so much for day one. I don't want to, there's only one way to go, and that's to draw in the lashes, draw in freckles and pores and lip detail, and I don't go that. I don't do that. I don't zoom in. It's just not my study style, let's say. I think I'm too young right now to even have a style, but it's definitely not my study style. As you can see, I threw in some hair, and I didn't like it. I wanted to kind of move in the direction of my old pieces from last year's January, but the hair kind of just wasn't the thing I was going for to get myself back into the practice. It was mostly just get that expression right. Make her a person, not just a template or a perfect Barbie doll face. Make her look like a person. And that's what mattered to me. So I just turned off the hair and focused more on what mattered, which was more detail, more focus on the mouth, trying to figure out better mouth rendering. I think the mouth is the least good of all the things that I draw, mostly because I'm super cautious about adding detail there, and I just want to make sure that it's all fleshy looking and realistic and out of the way. I even took out the speculars on the eyes, because even that was a challenge in maintaining the detail. Just as contrast and edge work focused. And if I throw in a small detailed thing, anything that's small that needs a small brush, it will eclipse over all the work you did in contrast and edge work, and I just didn't like that. I lightened the background value because it made her look like she has a deeper skin tone, and that made her look more like a mixed race or African. So I really like that effect. Sometimes lightening the background and not touching your character will make them look that value, that sometimes midtones, even if it's a bright day outside, dark skin is dark skin. Usually people change the background value and change the values of the character, and that's not acceptable. So not having Liquify, staying away from zooming in detail, these are all the major issues. And I can see that she has asymmetry, but I guess I can call it organic asymmetry, because I tried to make sure that my flip wasn't pulling. But as you can see, the nostril is pulling towards the top left. The mouth is pulling. The eyebrow is pulling towards the top left. That's that distortion I was talking about. And you don't see it, or I don't see it when I flip. It's crazy. So look out for that weird scope of distortion, that perspective distortion that you might have as well. I definitely have one, and I have to look out for it. Even the jawline, I can see it now way after, is off, and you guys will see in your PSD copies. Thank you everyone for your patronage. Thank you all for being here and for watching. Our goal is 1,000 patrons. I really appreciate it when you guys show up to the streams as well, and make sure that you guys do show up to the streams for your recording, for your homework, or else I do recordings instead of doing the streams for the patrons. Thank you all. I will see you guys in my next video next month. Good luck with all your homework, and stay in conversation. Let me know what you got. Update me with your processes. I'd love to see what you guys are working on for your homework submissions. Bye, everyone.